Special Interest Committee of the EMS Advisory Council Subcommittee group this morning. There are a couple of handouts going out, and the first two are going to be the minutes. I'll explain briefly what we'd like to do today and try to get people up to speed. The Special Interest Committee was formed at the end of the last EMSAC committee, and it was because several felt that there needed to be some additional time spent on particularly community paramedicine and MIH, and then also CCT, as these have been very active groups within the state. And so it becomes, from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. this morning, an opportunity to address those issues. One of the things I was doing in kind of prep for that last night was to, and the people in the front may have to kind of share a couple of the packets. I didn't know, I made 20 sets and then I made 30 of, or 35 of this. The next time I'll make 50 of everything, so to make sure that everyone has one. But what I wanted to do was do an overview. There is so much information that's really been coming out of the community paramedic program and then separately the CCT program that I felt that if we kind of had an open discussion, I was afraid that we may end up in short a time or there'd be conflicting information. So what I did yesterday was simply print out the minutes of the last two that were printed, community paramedic program. And so you should have, and if you could kind of share, and some in the front might be able to share some back, what they would be is the statewide community paramedic meeting minutes of February 28th and then April 11th. We've had a meeting since then, but the minutes haven't come out. I think that the items that are on here, though, will give a good overview, and then we have a lot of people in the fifth row that were a part of that committee. So as things come up on there, if there's been anything that's additional to that, please let us know. I'd like to try to conclude this portion of it probably within about 15 or 20 minutes, see what the questions are, and then turn over to the CCT, which I also have the last couple of minutes, sets of minutes for that, and hand out, and then turn it over to those in that committee that can bring up, because there's a lot of activity in both. And so before we begin, is there any broad questions about how this particular subcommittee will be ran this morning? Or is there any overall questions before we get started? It seemed like it's a worthwhile situation. And I think that in the future, one of the things I was thinking about coming up here is that we need to try to get a situation where perhaps these minutes are put on websites and stuff so people can kind of keep up as they go along. I think I'm getting some nods, and I think that that's something that may be helpful too, because there's, for those that travel, and a lot of us travel to a lot of these meetings, it's very time consuming, but when you get down to it, a lot of times there's a small group that knows a lot about it, and then there's some people that may have some very substantial pieces of information that will be important that may not get that until these quarterly reports. Fair enough? All right, so the last thing I want to do, just as a matter of course, this is not from the advisory council, the single page. I think most people should have one of them. Because I am on several of these committees, I just wrote myself some notes. And so that's basically what this is, whether the different chairs want to bring up something different or not. This, I went back to the last three sets of EMSAC meetings and put on here from those notes who is the chair and members of these committees. So to give you a quick overview, on the special committee, EMSAC would have members that had an interest in it, and so they sat in front, and then some people are on multiple committees. These may change obviously over time, and that's probably something that will be brought up at the EMSAC. Obviously everyone can have input into it. I wanted to put out a little bit of an agenda on mine and a couple of them that I'm involved with, and then we'll go from there. So this isn't an official, it's kind of a rough guide if people want to make some comments on it or fill in as they need to today. Fair enough? All right. So mobile integrated healthcare, the process has been moving along. I would say quickly, although in government sometimes it's hard to to say, when you're a part of something that is brand new, here's the 3 things everyone in the state should know. Very importantly, legislatively, we were able to change and insert into 64 CSR 48 the rules necessary to allow for projects in community paramedicine. All right, so we are lawfully able to start those projects, and there was 6 studies that were allowed. People, I think, originally felt that that meant that there could only be 6 agencies or 6 kinds of projects or something, and I know that some people felt that there was concern that only certain agencies would get in. That's not the way that was written. It's written that there are 6 different types of projects, so it's pretty broad. I think essentially most agencies could come in under those original pilot guidelines. The reason that was so important is because we have to create a community paramedic program from scratch. And how do you put something into code that you don't know how the MOUs and things are going to be developed, or what the scope of practice may be as it evolves. So the language that came in I thought was very positive, very strong, and did get through the West Virginia legislature. So that was step 1, very critical. Step 2 part was starting that process. And so if you look at some of the minutes, instead of going through it, there is this very broad group of people that have been involved with sustaining that. I led with Dr. Eschenauer and Dr. Buzz Mason, and those are the 2 that are key, and then people probably up to 15 or 20 that have been involved from the very beginning. So on this, from the beginning, from my perspective, before everyone jumps in, big or small squads, there was 2 things about community paramedicine that I've always said have been the problems. It's a great idea. I think we can do a lot of good. There's only 2 challenges. One is there was no reimbursement, and the second was there is little liability protection. And if you think about a business venture without reimbursement or liability protection, it's not going to go too far. So when you look through these minutes briefly, if you look at the 228, business sustainability and funding was a fundamental issue that we're trying to get done. And so Ted Cheatham, along with others, the short version of this is it seems like funding will come into place. The PEIA, the Medicaid program, a lot of the major insurance vendors, along with a lot of individual hospitals and perhaps hospital groups, are all interested in trying to find a way to reimburse EMS for these services, because they all see it obviously as part of their best interest to keep someone out of the hospital. On this first one, because that is such a major issue, anyone from that group, Rita or anyone back there, do you have any comments about where we're at with that moving forward as far as funding? I know it's a tough one to start with.
Yeah, the avenues that you just mentioned, I think from a statewide perspective are those that everyone is looking into. And the key is sustainability, and trying to focus on a path that's going to make it there in the future, as well as we move through the demonstration projects.
And I think across the nation, what we found with community paramedics is that if it's a grant program, if it was a community program, there's always a good start. And that first year or 2, even at the hospitals, if for instance the hospitals could save, $3 million, it would be easy for that hospital to say, well then I'll give $500,000 or $700,000 to the EMS. But in the 3rd year, when you're no longer saving that $3 million, the cost is now down to that $700,000. Well then, will they still sustain that? And so that sustainability over the long term is one of the big challenges that we have. And I think that's been one of the things that we kind of went through with tools and equipment. There is an entire list of tools that's been pre-approved, and I have a copy up there. And so sometimes if people, all of these things, if you look at it, I want to kind of show you this because sometimes people say, well, what have you done? So there is a program application, all right, and it has been approved. There is the memorandum of understanding, and these all have the seal of the State Office of EMS. And I know Dr. Mills isn't here yet, but I mean, he's been working hand in hand with this in the state office. So we do have that, and we do have the community paramedic equipment list. So there is a lot of work that's been done. Now, whether everything is published out or when things get rolled back, we also have a 137-page set of protocols for community paramedics. So when you look at it, the packet for community paramedics is well on its way. It's nearly complete. Everything is in those final drafts, and I think as far as getting that situation from that to a rollout phase is coming. I think that this program has worked very well in trying to get that done. Now, for those that may have, because if I was not in all these meetings, or a lot of them, then you always get this, well, what is it and how is it and everything else. I think that if you've got a true interest, now would be a good time to start talking with the Office of EMS and get copies of all of this and see where that may fit in with your agencies, large or small. So again, there's going to be no precursor, and there should be no challenges to a squad, whether you've got 2 employees or 200, to become a part of this process. Okay? Because I think that was something that came up from before. Rules and performance management, again, we've been working through all of that. Medical Director Task Force, again, the MPCC and Dr. Mills has looked at these protocols. There is an expanded scope of practice, and I'm going to move forward with it. And through the rest of it, you can look at it, you can see lots of lengthy discussions. The big part that I wanted to get to is on the second agenda. And so on the April 11th one, we have the scope of practice. And so you can look at that and some of the work that's been gone through. Certification and recertification. It is interesting at this part. I know a couple of people walked into the room now, and that's going to be helpful. There is no current certification, and this is back in April, and it's moving forward. Our recertification, it's an educational process. So it's an expanded scope of practice after field paramedic. And so proposed data tracking forms, sustainability and funding, again, as you notice, we did a lot with that. And my favorite, on the second page of the April 11th education, we have had a community paramedic program, and people have worked through that process. There's been some modifications nationally on how that curriculum will work. And so if you haven't gone through it yet, you might be a little bit better off, because the first one is just like anything you do the first time. You got to work through it one way and then come back and work through it the other way. Right now, Tracy Corbin, who is in the back of the room, if you have specific questions, has been tasked along with the Education Committee, and that's a big committee with Rich and everyone else on it, to develop both the MHP and the Mobile Integrated Healthcare and the Community Paramedic Program. So there will be something at the basic level and then at the advanced level, and all of that is being developed. It will be a online blended program with a lot of community involvement. Okay? Now, all of that, and I got that done in about 10 minutes, so that's pretty good. So now what I really want to do is turn it back to the other people of the group. And so anyone in the audience that has worked, a lot of them are more chairs of the subcommittee on community paramedic. And Rita, just raise your hand, so please come back with that.
On the April 11th, on number 7, rules performance at the bottom, they list James Mason's email address as the osteopathic school. He's
Right.
just recently put out an email to use his Gmail, not
Gmail
this
account.
one. So where it says you want to join, we want to get that Gmail address, not this one.
He just sent that out
Yeah.
2 days ago. As a
Yeah,
matter of
so
fact,
I
I
just
just
wanted to
updated
put
it in
it-
my phone. For those that,
Paul, can we share the next date of the meeting? It's July the 11th at 10 a.m.
yes. All right.
If
So-
anybody would like a copy of the 523 minutes, those could be distributed. I emailed them to you just 5 minutes ago.
Okay, thank you so much.
So you should.
So under, if you have this sheet, right, which I did think I have 35 of them, so I think most people should have this one. If you could do 3 things for me on this, and we'll kind of look at community paramedics if we don't have it. One, if you could give us Buzz's email. Do you have it? And so people can write it down on here if they want to get that.
buzz.mason,
Just wait, so it's B-U,
ZZ.MASON @gmail.com.
okay, so that's number one. Now, number two, as far as the last sets of minutes,
They were emailed on June the 5th. He was
I
trying to
didn't,
transfer a
well,
listserv.
that might be my bad that I didn't
Okay.
have them, but I know I
That's
looked
okay.
through, so I don't know.
We'll just resend them to you.
So do you want that just to go back to Buzz also?
If you could, anyone that wants to join, if you could put them back, they can email him and he'll keep the master list updated.
Okay.
And push out all that information for upcoming large group CP meetings.
Now, and the next meeting date is?
July the 11th at 10 a.m. at the county.
And that
you
is
have-
Kanawha County.
Absolutely. If you have an interest for joining and you can't due to distance or travel and you can't make it, just shoot us an email and once you join our listserv, usually the week of, there'll be a reminder that the Buzz will send out an email that the meeting's coming up, kind of send out some agenda talking points, and also the dial-in conference number to Kanawha County. And that way you can join us by our Scopia if you would so choose to do so, if you can't attend in person.
All right, so 2 points for your take home. One, buzz.mason@gmail.com. Send all information, requests, minutes, anything that you want. We'll just have one source for that. And the next one is the July 11th meeting. Is there any show of hands of squads that have an interest in moving forward with this? I know at the last meeting there was several. So I would have you get with
Please. Just come find me.
those two at break, and they're much more. I'm involved, but I'm not nearly as involved as intimately as they are. Yes, sir.
Well, I put,
Jim.
under the committee section, I added the special interest committee on the EMSAC website.
Okay.
And you guys want one there posted to that, you just send it to me, we'll stick it on.
And we need to do that. And that's on my part too. And I was kind of looking at this process. I think the next time we'll do much. I think that we need to get that out because I was just thinking about this and how do you get everybody involved. So that's going to be it. Now, Rich, I know you're part. Do you have any comments about the CP?
No, I mean, I like where it's gone, and the guys behind me have done a lot of the work to get it there, so giving them the kudos. In our program in particular, just watching what Monica and Matt and other people who've had some play in that, it's growing and it's moving quickly, and I think it'll take off at some point here soon with the way the hospitals are viewing it as well.
Right. And Monica, Rita, anything with final comments on community paramedic?
No, I think from you mentioned, and we are in the process, you mentioned CP protocols.
Right.
We are working with, this past week, Dr. Mills and Dr. Eschenhauer did receive the mobile healthcare provider, the basic EMT level protocols to review, and hopefully those will be all ready to go forward at the next NPCC meeting.
All right.
For approval and moving forward with that process. And I know, Tracy, you're working
Right.
on the education piece of that as well.
And Tracy, I know I was going to hand out this, but I wasn't on the first page. This is one of the drafts. I think it was pretty much the final. But Tracy Corbin's been really instrumental in taking the data from Minnesota and a lot of other groups and putting it into the West Virginia. So if you look at wanting to become a community paramedic or start at the EMT level, Tracy, could you mention just briefly about what will be available and kind of where the status is on those programs?
Both us and Kanawha County are running our first mobile healthcare provider and community paramedic programs August 21st. We're just waiting for state approval for the CP piece. The MHP is an EMT basic scope of practice for community health. It's 40 hours, it's all information. It's the same first 40 hours that the paramedic will receive. The paramedic then will do an additional 53 hours of lab, and then the remaining 97 hours of clinical to make up the community paramedic piece.
And where is that?
It's hybrid, it's online. It looks like it's going to be 1 day a week for the duration of a 15-week course at the end.
And where is that process at?
We're waiting for approval for the CP piece. The MHP piece has been approved through the West Virginia Office of EMS. I'm waiting on the community paramedic piece to get approval. It's in the CIS system. It's been in there for a couple of weeks.
All right. Any questions, and then any questions from the panel up front here? I'm sorry, I kind of overtook that process. And I'm going to move in because what I really think is between these two, what my thought was as chair is I was going to try to do 10 minutes or 15 minutes a piece and then leave 20 minutes for discussion. That was kind of my idea, and I thought I wanted to try to put this stuff out so that people would have an opportunity to kind of mull over some things and come back. So I'm going to have a couple of other handouts, and again, next time I will do much better with this as far as the amount of them. There are 3. There's probably enough for about every 2 or 3 people. If you want to get it, this will be the the May 12th, the May 24th, and then just a quick cover sheet of things that we'll be going over. So if you can kind of share between 2, we'll go through that process. All right, so the CCT subcommittee, which there are numerous members here, and so I want to do maybe 8 minutes on this and turn it over to those committee members, has been extremely active. It's been a 2-part process. One is that we have probably, I don't want to compete with CP, but we have put in a tremendous amount of hours on a process that needs to be completed and rolled out and done. And there is a lot of policy change, and I think that what's going to happen here in the next few minutes is perhaps you guys will understand why a rewrite, an update of CCT guidelines, and perhaps some work on C3, which has been around for 30 years, why it's taken a year or more to get this little update done. And so going back to this original sheet that I think most people have on mine, I want to kind of give an overview. Most of this is in the final steps. With Dr. Mills later, we'll kind of transition to whether it's done or not. I think that most of these policies are complete, but they obviously have not been rolled out to the state. So until they are out in your hands, they may or may not be complete. So what I want to do is just give you an idea about what this has evolved into, okay? At the beginning, we're going to start at the top. There are 7 classes of certification in the state of West Virginia. And it came to be that we basically have ended up looking at all 7 classes. So something that we had started out with, maybe with some CCT, has now just continued to evolve into looking at, because if you're doing an interfacility, if this person can do this, then what does that mean that person can do? And so as you go down this, you can't do one. And trying to do it in a vacuum was a challenge. So under class 1, the current proposal, which has been passed, is that there's been a slight change to that. So CCT level 1 remains pretty much what it looks like now. That is the helicopters, right? Air medical, ground transport. The one difference with it was that now whether you're an MCCN plus an MCCP plus either a pilot or an MBO or whoever's driving the vehicle, it now can be 2 MCCPs and a driver or a pilot or 2 MCCNs. So now the MCCN and MCCP, as long as there are 2 of those individuals on the vehicle, then it is a class 1. There is differences with education experience, but it goes kind of both ways on which direction that is. So the class 1, that's changed. And from that, they still operate what we want to consider guidelines, which gives them a good bit of autonomy to make changes. What is a class 1 call? If you kind of, for those that have this sheet, this has a few alterations from it, but it just kind of gives a depiction. It's been used for about a year. So basically what it says is that if you anticipate there being changes in ventilator settings en route, if you anticipate that the patient's going to become hemodynamically unstable, or they are, that you're going to be changing level fed up or down the ladder, they're going to go from 10 to 15, that you may have to start some other type of drip, that you may have to be giving additional blood, that the ventilator settings, you may have to RSI en route, that, those ventilators, that we kind of know what CCT is. But at that level, it is someone that is going to be, the patient's going to be engaged by the two CCT level personnel en route. Make sense? They're an unstable, we always bounce around that word. They are to where they have to get to a tertiary care center, and we're part of that healthcare team to try to get them there. Make sense? Now, across the state, particularly on ground, I don't think this will happen with air, but particularly on ground, there was a host of people needing transferred from one facility to another that may have been on a ventilator, but there was no anticipated change en route. And people look at maybe 20, 30, 40, 50% of all critical care calls, there's not going to be a change with the ventilator. The patient's been on that ventilator setting for hours, perhaps sometimes days, although we're not talking that they're going for major surgery. We're talking about these people are just on ventilators. Some of them are even on home vents that are now very sophisticated. So you have to have someone with knowledge but of the ventilator settings, but you don't anticipate any change. No resuscitative action en route. Make sense? They may be on 5 of Levofed to keep a blood pressure of 120, but they've been on Levofed for a long time. Substantially. You're not anticipating a change. But those are some pressors. This new class, Class 2, would allow those patients to be transported with a single CCT trained MCCP or MCCN. Further from that, that MCCP or MCCN who has full knowledge of hemodynamic IV monitoring and, as importantly, the sophisticated ventilators that are now coming into play, but they don't need that second person because there's not an anticipation. If you think of an ICU bed, even one-on-one nursing is what it is. It's really not two-on-one nursing. And in the back of the truck, it's kind of two-on-one for CCT. And we recognize because you don't have the support, you need that. But that's kind of where these people are. So you've got your eyes on the patient, you're transporting, but you have to understand the vents. You have to have the exact same education as the CCT team, but you wouldn't necessarily need all the equipment if you have access to that ventilator and monitor. We think that that could decrease the amount of double ground CCT calls by 30-40%. What that allows, because most all agencies have to combine 2 trucks to get that team together, then for instance, I'll just give an example. So we have 7 CCT trucks. If they were all having to be C2 that day, then we would have 7 911 trucks available that would not be combined going for an inter-facility. That wouldn't happen that way, but that gives you the idea of how that could happen. That's step 1. All right, so that's for the established. The real purpose of C2, and we do call it C2 and not CCT, is that now all of those counties that previously or do have critical care transports, Webster Springs is one, for instance, that has multiple, up to 5 or 6 CCT certified individuals in this squad, but they operate, either for air crews or ground crews elsewhere. They come home, they would certainly volunteer for that agency, and that would allow Webster Springs or those rural hospitals to now have Class 2 CCT level interventions for them. Finally, and that's part of the first the pilot project is Webster Springs and Princeton. And then finally, for all those other areas in the northern part of the state or across the state that squads don't really have the investment capability of putting on a complete CCT truck and crews, that one CCT individual trained in the same program that's being offered online across the state could now bring that home to Tucker County, Grant, Elkins, Harrison County. I mean, Harrison, for instance, has had it. and has stepped away. We want them to come back. You know what I'm saying? Those are the types of things, not pointing it out, but you know, that's things that we look at, is that we now could have that level. And the ventilator sophistication continues to go up. The ventilators may be safer for patients to transfer with the sophistication, but you have to be able to run them. Does that make sense? So CCT has more availability. Class 2 gives us, hopefully in the state, a lot more availability as we grow for sophisticated in-facility transports. Right now, we're supposed to be doing an IoT within, going out of one hospital within 90 minutes is kind of the gold standard, 60 to 90, and it could be up to 2 or 3 hours or maybe 4 in some areas. And we think this is EMS's way to be a part of that trauma system to get some of those patients out. Make sense? All right. So I'm going to stop there for a second. Is there agencies here that feel that they may be interested in that class 2? All right. So we've got several. We want this rolled out. The protocols, the guidelines for CCT are complete and approved, not distributed. The class 2 is just going to end up being a change. It's going to be kind of between paramedic and ACT, where the guidelines CCT can do more independently. The class 2 would probably be able to do most of those same skills. They would just need to contact sending or receiving. There is this whole process now where we're developing orders where the sending physician can write orders for meds. So the third thing that's happening with that level is the med list may be going away. So it would then be that if you have sandostatin that theoretically no one can transport it in the state, or if you have Dilaudid no one can transport it in the state, or if it's nitro paste, then you don't know who can transport it in the state. That essentially, if it's a new drug, particularly if it's a core, or some of these places that have a very interesting drug, that if the sending physician will write an order, do education, then interfacility people following a policy can then transport that. Not today, but that's what's written and has been tentatively approved. Okay? Class 3, we're just going to be working on what they do. It's going to be probably more advanced. They will probably be able to do more. And class 4 is paramedic. Class 5 is ACT, the EMTI program. Currently, Dr. Mills may have more about that, about what they can transport in their facility. It's been kind of bounced up and down. They could do some meds. They've kind of limited the meds, and now it may or may not come back to doing some meds. Any question about the CCT? Because I am so done hearing myself talk. So I know you guys are. So I'm giving you 25 minutes, and I'm going to look at the panel here and then to the groups that's been on the committees to take that kind of rough overview and go through with that. Oh, I apologize on the special interest. I did want to add, as far as advanced care technician, we believe, and this will be brought up at the EMSAC and stuff, but National Registry does seem like there's going to be transition for the next couple of years at least, and that is a program that is expanding right now. And so I wanted it under new business, under special interest, since we're able to do that. And I think that that'll come up in a couple of other committees and maybe at the EMSAC main meeting today. But I did want you to have some information about that, because a lot of other agencies are now starting to do that as a stepping stone. Most people are doing the ACT program as kind of the first half of the paramedic program. So it does get ALS people out there. And we just personally had 3 young girls in their early teens in an ATV accident, and the 2 ACTs that were in that rural part there first probably were very instrumental in saving their lives. So in our experience, what we said was an ACT half through a medic class is now ALS while they get the second half, and replaces a BLS ambulance, is exactly true. I mean, we see that every week. We recognize what the power of those people are being ALS and being able to do those life-saving skills versus waiting for that full year. And that 6 months makes a difference to us. It may or may not, you think, in the aggregate, but in specific situations, our STEMIs and everything else have been going that way. So we're going to be a strong proponent of it. I know that not everyone feels the same, but we've been a strong proponent of getting education out there and giving people the opportunity to make a difference. All right. With Beth, Rita, Matt, as far as the CCT programs, What else do you want to put in as far as ideas or questions with it? I'm actually going to have a seat, so you guys can stand up and talk about it.
One clarification that I noticed isn't on this particular is
Go ahead and stand up, please. Thank you. And introduce yourself to.
Rita White with Kanawha County Ambulance.
Thank you.
On Critical Care Committee. On this form here at the top, AeroMed will remain MCCN plus MCCP. Ground is the only option to do class 1 as full medic. The other thing, part of the drive for this, for those of you, for maybe some of you don't know, that a pilot in the north allowed Levofed to go C3 regardless of hemodynamics. Insulin is also C3. So we were trying to bridge the gap with that and improve education, patient outcomes. I'm sure they did really good education with their folks on this particular drugs and stuff, but we wanted a more well-rounded approach to that. The other thing that is not on this form that has been in discussion is patients on more complex ventilators with drips and stuff going, of having a second set of hands. Doesn't have to be critical care provider, doesn't have to be a medic, just second set of hands, so if something happens, you gotta work on a pump and a vent at the same time, you got somebody who can bag for you. So we hope that people don't see this as decreasing critical care transport. We hope people see this as improving availability and making it to where it's more accessible statewide without having to have all of the equipment and truck that is required at this point. For people who do not have their own equipment, there will be an MOU with facilities. You will train on their equipment. You will have to have sign-offs that you did at a minimum of annually to prove that you trained with this equipment and you are confident in using this equipment before you can share that with facilities. That's one of the ways to get the equipment. IV pumps, ventilators are expensive pieces of equipment that will be required in some of the C2 transfers. So with that, the hospital and EMS can maybe share that cost or responsibility to help get the patients out quicker. So that's just all I have with that.
Rita, we think for one moment to go back to the spirit of what we're trying to do here.
Hey, Beth.
To fill the gap.
Beth, if you can go ahead and stand up and go to the. Introduce yourself too, please.
Beth Hammonds, Aaron Backer, sit on the subcommittee for CCP and C2. And I think the spirit of what we're trying to do here, guys, and I want to just reiterate this, is we're not trying to downgrade the level of care. What we've noticed is you've got areas of the state that have CCT available, readily available. We have areas of the state that doesn't. CCT is a limited resource. We have a great CCT program across the state. However, in those moments where you don't have CCT available, but you have critically trained practitioners out there that could be utilized, we've tried to fill that gap. So please, again, don't think that we are in any way trying to decrease the level of care in the state, because it's not what we're trying to do at all. We're trying to increase the availability of that level of care across the state. Did I cover that?
Matt, do you have any comments? Anyone else on the committee see anything from the panel up here? I know this has been, from now on, this is not going to be this way. I just had a lot to catch up. Do you have, Dr. Rucky, you obviously have experience. Do you have, as far as medically, do you have any thoughts about it? Or?
No, I think it's a great idea. I mean, I know and I'm from the Northern Panhandle, we have a lot of issues with getting CCT transport unless we're flying people. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great thing. And I know I'm joining up, I'm kind of entering the dance a little late here, but tell me what C3 is.
Okay, yes.
I'm looking at
and that's incredibly important. I'm sorry. So,
okay.
So class 1 is 2 CCT individuals, class 2 is 1. Class 3 was built because class 4 is a field paramedic. What happened probably 15, 20 years ago was they built something that because we were so smart in the state, we called it class 3 IFT. So a field paramedic needs to take additional training, a couple of days of training to do interfacility. What that is, Tracy, you want to read that out real quick, or Ashley? What is the class 3 training modules? There's like 9 of them. Ashley, we just did this.
do a not
C3.
C3, how to do a C3 call, cardiology, respiratory, pediatrics, lines and devices, and then the lab.
So what it did was it took a paramedic and said, this is how you do a chest tube, this is what you do to manage a Foley catheter, this is what you do to run IV pumps, and you have to set up some drips on different types of pumps. This is some basic ventilator settings. Come on, Ashley. That's basically what it is. It's 9 modules that's been set by the state. And so what it does from a reimbursement standpoint, I tend to think I'm only doing one in here from true management sometimes. So what happens from reimbursement is the Centers for CMS will basically say that if you have training beyond the scope of a field paramedic, then that becomes an SCT or specialty care transport. There is a reimbursement bump, which everyone in the state needs it. And if you guys don't know it, I know your billing departments do, or at least they should, because you get that bump. And so what you have is an EMT, class 6, EMTI, or ACT, class 5, paramedic, class 4. And then this class 3 was put in, which is a paramedic with additional training. So then in this class, there's now class 3, the lowest level of interfacility, class 2, and class 1. So it bumps that up and allows them to do things. The challenge that we've had across the state was that there was a lot of people trained as class 3, field paramedic with a day or two extra. CCT is 12, 15 weeks, a lot of additional training. What we were trying to come up with is what can the class 3s do without expanding it where the training is so advanced that, again, these small squads, I don't keep saying small squads, any squad, it's hard to get people to go through that process, but give them the knowledge they need. And that's why we put the class 2 in the middle, which said, all right, somebody already has been through the CCT program, but they don't have the trucks and everything that they can now do that. So the class 3 is probably the next step that we have, and that's going to be what they can do. What kind of ventilator can they do? It used to be called a simple vent, which is without pressure support. Pete, you could do not pressure support. Pressure support really helps. It makes the vent a lot more safe. So to sit there and say that we're going to take this away tends to put them at a disadvantage in their patient. But the ventilators have gotten so sophisticated that to sit there and say we're going to try to train people on all of that became overburdened. That's why we ended up with that second class. Said, look, they'll go through this training, but they won't need the equipment, all the truck, and they won't need the second person. And that's where class 2 was born. So that's a perfect question about where we're at. In the northern half of the state, probably half of the counties of the state, there may not be ground CCT readily available, and class 3s have been doing a tremendous job with those facilities. So we know we're going to bump that up. We're hoping that some of those class 3s that are really getting sophisticated patients will hopefully step up to class 2 and get some people in their squads that will be able to take that next step and get that additional education.
And the other point to that was C3 is not required in continuing education other than keeping up their current paramedic card. CCT or C2 will have to do quarterly modular skill training, chart reviews, just like critical care providers are required now. So they will have to team up with a training center to do this.
So any other questions? Now, and I know, Marcia, you're going to be talking a lot later, but what about you with Cavill as far as, have you had any thoughts? I know Victor has been very involved here recently, but do you have any thoughts about, is Victor here?
Victor is not.
Okay.
Most of you, or some of you, are familiar with Brett Wellman, who was our CCT educator for years. Brett went on to obtain his nurse practitioner and moved on. So we hired Victor Workman as our CCT educator now for Cavill County EMS. He does currently have a class he started last week, which is our first CCT class that Victor has been the instructor in with us, so that is going well. But I don't want to speak for him as to his future plans, and I know he's been involved in the committees with you, but we are moving forward and looking forward to assisting anyone as a training center that needs help with any skills or education.
HealthNet, anyone else want to speak to? I know you've been very involved. HealthNet's been very involved too. I just noticed that they weren't as far as there. As you got any comments as far as?
Cliff Fordyce represents us on the committee. He's kept us informed, and we're up to date and supportive. We'll continue to support the effort statewide.
Connie, do you have any?
Can we share all of the handouts on the website?
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that possible?
Yes, ma'am.
That way everybody has the information. I know that, when I was pulling up some information for the meeting, the website's really helpful, that I know Paul shared all this information, so hopefully it'll be on the website.
All right. Any questions from, which is really, and again, I don't know if I'm going to apologize, but I don't want, it's 8 a.m. One of the things that really happened here was there was just a lot of data. And if you think about the last couple of meetings for those that were here, we kept kind of push CP and CCT in with protocols. You know, and I was talking with Jamie earlier, I was like saying, well, we got protocols, we got that, but that's not really that section for the other training part. So that's why we have this, you know, as we always call the tiger meeting in the morning. But this time I'm hopeful, if you think about the next quarterly meeting, shouldn't be this. We had to catch up a lot, and hopefully by the next quarter, things are being enacted. And hopefully a lot of people from out in the field are going to be saying, hey, this is what we're doing, and this is what we're, you know, how we're doing. Special interest, last thing, because I'm about 10:04, and I wanted to give some time for breaks in between me and whatever. What I need is, does anyone have something else? So special interest is the subcommittee that was designed, you know, to capture those things. ACT may become part of it or may not, depending on how that works. But what else is there that we should have on the agenda for next? Because I'd like to set the agenda, get it out early for the next meeting, get things on the website and bring it back. So is anybody, I'll ask first the panel up here, is there anything that you think we should bring up at the next special interest group?
I think as long as we continue with our updates on CT and mobile healthcare, to get that out to everybody and keep them informed for those that may not have a direct contact.
And Jamie, if it would be for special interest, I'd like to at least maybe put a parentheses with CP, CCT, just because even I was kind of struggling for a minute there to figure out what the special interest is. It will be more than that. I think right now, when I'm out at conferences and stuff, there's a lot of interest. People, I think at Pipestem, I think I had 4 or 5 people come up and go, you guys are little finger bangers because we don't know about this, and you guys are all creating this somewhere down here and we don't know about it. And I was like, wow, it's kind of like making sausage, you know. There's a lot of stuff going on. But on the other hand, if that was me, I perfectly understand that. You know, you want to be involved. And I think what Jamie's doing with the website, we got to get better at that. Buzz Mason, if you don't know him, has been tremendous with notes. I mean, he's got 1,000 pages of documentation that CP is trying to do, and so maybe we can try to incorporate some of that as it expands out, or at least capture those people that have a real interest in it, that are looking at it in the other parts of the state. And you can Scopia, trust me on that, and the other, and it's not terribly difficult. A teleconference is really good. If it's a 3-hour drive, you can basically just listen in, and you can generally get most of your points across while you're still sitting at your desk. So we definitely encourage that too. One more time from the group, anything else as far as special interest, as far as topics? Anything in EMS as far as rescue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all of those type of activities? Yes.
We have some interest in tactical emergency casualty care.
Okay. What's the official, how would you want to, I know exactly what you're saying, but what would be the way of putting that as a title?
I think there should be some consideration in creating a protocol for those teams and so forth that are providing those services per se.
Are we calling it tactical medic? What's the national generic term?
TCCC is what the
military
police are
term.
using.
That's the military.
Say it one more time.
Tactical emergency casualty care.
Yeah, TECC.
Tactical casualty care.
Yeah, tactical emergency casualty.
I definitely concur that that's probably, because there are teams being formed, and whether there are teams formed or not, we're going to be put in those situations. And there is a whole set of equipment that we have on our ambulances, and whether that should all be combined in one kind of a kit or not, or where that's at and how you interact with law enforcement, active shooters, etc. I think that that's the perfect fit for this. Anything else? And do you have a group?
As far as the PECC, we have 4 of our providers trained, and there's training constantly going on in Huntington by Dr. Dominique Wong. So if anyone's interested or would like her contact information, she's just a wonderful person and kind of her passion. She's an ER doc at Cabell, but she also teaches the tactical care courses. So if anyone would like her contact, I will share her email, which she's given us permission to do to anybody that would like to
You
talk
give
to
it to
her.
me, I'll
Maybe
put it
get
on
to
the
her.
site.
Okay.
And if I guess this is officially a committee, so we can make a subcommittee. I'd like to have a subcommittee of the Special Interest Committee on TECC and have Marcia Knight, Shane Wheeler, and Tracy Corbin to head that. Who else would want to be on that? Is anybody else actively involved in doing those? Excellent.
Ed Hannon.
Ed Hannon. Now, can you make sure you get with me with your email? Can you write it on a sheet of paper?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Matt, really? What do you know about it? He goes running behind the, I didn't even tell you what he does. Okay. Williamson. As a matter of fact, go ahead.
Hanley.
What's that?
Dylan Hanley.
From?
Mason.
Very good.
We've been doing a lot of work with our law enforcement at home. So.
Can you write, Sarah, off the bottom of your sheet of paper, maybe you two could get together and write down your information on it. And Marcia, can you? All right. So everybody get with Marcia on that, and then we'll look in 3 months, so we'd like to have a report back with some protocols and, whatever we can do with that, so we're actually moving forward on it, not just discussing it. Because I think we've got enough teams right now that we're already doing it.
Okay.
Connie, anything?
No.
Anything for the good of the order? Call for adjournment? Everybody's got to adjourn.
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 All right, we're adjourned.